The savanna had rules that never change. Hunger ruled everything. Weakness was answered with teeth. A lion did not hesitate, did not ask questions, did not plead. That was what Ranger Elias Monroe had believed for 17 years. Ever since his first patrol across the scorched plains, it was what every ranger learned, what every survivor manual warned, and what every scar on his body confirmed. And yet on that morning, the line in front of him broke every rule nature had ever written. Eli had been driving alone along a dry riverbed just after dawn, the sky still, pale and colorless. When the radio crackled static and died, he slowed the vehicle, instinct prickling along his spine. Silence in the savanna was never empty. It meant something was holding its breath. Then he saw the lion, a massive male, stood in the open grass barely 30 yards ahead, his mane dark and heavy, his body tense, but not in the posture of attack. Elias's foot slammed on the brake, the engine stalled. Dust settled slowly, revealing the animal in full terrifying clarity. The lion did not charge. Instead, he stepped closer. Elias's heart began to pound so hard it drowned out his thoughts. His hand moved toward the rifle mounted beside his seat, training, screaming in his ears. Dante run, Dante stare, Dante provoke. Lions Dante warned. Twice the lion stopped again, closer, now too close. Then he did something that made Elias freeze in disbelief. He lowered his head, not in submission, not in threat, but in something that looked dangerously close to hesitation. The lion let out a low sound, not a roar, not a snarl. It was rough, broken, uneven, almost urgent. Elias felt confusion slice through his fear. Predators did not make sounds like that. Predators did not look at humans as if expecting something. Get back, Elias whispered. Though his voice trembled, he raised his hands slowly, palms visible, his rifle forgotten. The lion did not react. Instead, he turned his head sharply, glancing over his shoulder toward a line of acacia trees. Then he looked back at Elias again. The message was impossible to ignore. The lion took a few steps away, stopped, and looked back once more. His tail lashed the ground, not in aggression, but in agitation. He paced in a tight circle, muscles rippling under scarred skin. Up close, Elias could see it now, old wounds across the lioness flank, a torn edge on one ear, dried blood darkening the fur beneath his chest. This was no healthy hunter guarding territory. This was an animal under strain. YRNT, you attacking? Elias muttered, his mouth dry. The lion answered by walking toward the trees again, then stopping, turning, staring straight at him. Golden eyes locked onto Elias's with a force that made his breath catch. There was no hunger in that gaze, no calculation. There was something raw and frantic. There's something that did not belong in the eyes of an apex predator. Something was wrong. Every instinct told Elias to stay in the vehicle, to restart the engine, to get distance. Rangers who trusted instincts like this didn't survive long. And yet another instinct, older and quieter, pressed against his chest. This lion was not hunting him. The lion let out that sound again, louder this time, vibrating through the air. Then, without warning, he walked straight toward Elias's vehicle. Elias's muscles locked. He could smell the animal, now hot and metallic, could hear the soft crunch of grass beneath paws, larger than his helmet. The lion stopped so close Elias could see his breath fog the air, and still he did not attack. Instead, the lion turned sharply and walked away again, faster this time, stopping at the edge of the trees. He looked back once more. then let out a deep, broken roar that echoed across the plains. It was not a declaration of dominance. It sounded like desperation. Elias's chest tightened. He had seen lions fight, kill, defend, abandon their wounded without a second glance. He had never seen one behave like this. "You want me to follow you," he said slowly, the realization sending a chill through him. The idea was absurd, dangerous, possibly fatal. The lion waited. Seconds stretched into eternity. Elias weighed protocol against what his eyes were telling him. This animal was not blocking his path. It was guiding him somewhere, and whatever lay beyond those trees was urgent enough for a lion to risk approaching a human. Elias turned the key. The engine coughed, then came alive. The lion did not flinch. He began walking steady and deliberate, glancing back every few steps as if to make sure Elias was still there. Against every rule he had ever lived by, Elias followed. The trees swallowed the light quickly. Shadows thickened. The air grew cooler, heavier. Elias's pulse thundered in his ears as the lion led him deeper, moving with purpose, now no longer hesitant. Twigs snapped under tires. Birds exploded into flight overhead. Then the lion stopped abruptly. He stood rigid, staring ahead, chest heaving. Elias cut the engine. Silence crashed down around them. From somewhere ahead came a faint sound, ragged breathing, low and weak, barely audible beneath the hum of insects. Elias stepped out of the vehicle before fear could stop him. That was when he saw her. A lioness lay half hidden among the roots of a fallen tree, her body twisted unnaturally, one flank dark with blood. Her sides rose and fell in shallow, uneven motions. One leg was caught in a steel snare, the wire cutting deep into flesh swollen with infection. Poachers. The male lion let out a low broken rumble and stepped between Elias and the lioness, not threatening, but protective. He glanced back at Elias, one's eyes burning with something that felt terrifyingly close to understanding. Elias's throat tightened. The lion had not come to kill, he had come to beg, and in that moment, standing between a wounded lioness and the predator who should have torn him apart, Elias realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Nature had not abandoned its rules, but love, loyalty, and desperation had rewritten them. Elias Monroe stood frozen at the edge of the fallen tree, the image before him refusing to settle into anything his mind recognized as real. The lioness lay trapped in the wire snare, her powerful body reduced to shallow breaths and trembling muscle. Blood had dried into her fur, and dark cracked patches and flies hovered in a relentless cloud around the wound. This was not a fresh injury. This was days old, maybe longer, and she was still alive. That alone unsettled him. In 17 years as a ranger, Elias had seen what snares did. Animals caught in them did not linger gracefully. They threshed until the wire cut to bone, until infection set in, until dehydration or shock finished what the metal had begun. Lions especially rarely survived. Their strength worked against them. Panic tightened the wire faster. Pride members often abandoned the injured, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Yet here she was, and here he was, standing unarmed in the shade of acacia roots, with a fully grown male lion positioned between him and the wounded female. The male did not growl. He did not bare his teeth. He simply stood there, massive shoulders, squared eyes, never leaving Elias's face. This isn't he normal, Elias thought, his heartbeat loud in his ears. Nothing about this was normal. Every protocol he had learned screamed at him to retreat, call for backup, Never approach a trap predator without a team. Never turn your back on a lion. Never trust behavior you cannot explain, and yet backing away felt wrong in a way that twisted his gut. The male lion shifted, his weight restless but controlled, his tail flicked once and again. He noticed how close he stayed to the lioness, how his body angled slightly toward her even as he watched the human, not guarding territory, guarding her. Elias swallowed hard. "You brought me here," he said quietly, as if the words might shatter something fragile in the air. "You could have killed me back there." The lioness' ears twitched. Elias felt absurd talking to an animal that could end his life in a single motion, yet he could not stop. His voice anchored him, kept panic from taking control. He crouched slowly, deliberately lowering himself to appear smaller, less threatening. The male lion tense but did not advance. That was the moment Elias felt it, not fear exactly, but a deep instinctive unease that pressed against his ribs. This lion was watching his decisions. Elias's gaze drifted back to the lioness. Her eyes were half open now, blazed but aware. When she shifted even slightly, a faint sound escaped her throat, something between a breath and a plea. The wire bit deeper, drawing fresh blood. Poachers had done this not for meat, not for survival, for money, for trophies, for traps they might never even return to check. Anger surged through Elias's, hot and sharp, but it tangled with something else just as powerful: hesitation. If he stepped closer, he risked provoking the male. If he did nothing, the lioness would die slowly, and if he called for backup, if he left now, there was no guarantee she would survive the hours it would take for a team to arrive. The male lion let out a low rumble, not aggressive, but vibrating with tension. He glanced back at the lioness, then returned his gaze to Elias, eyes dark and unblinking. It felt like being judged. "You don't know what you're re-asking," Elias murmured. His hands trembled despite his efforts to stay calm. "I am not supposed to be here like this." Another step forward, slow, measured. The lion shifted, mirroring him, keeping the same distance. A silent negotiation unfolded between them. One without rules or language. Elias understood. This wasn't the instinct. It was intention. Elias's mind raced through possibilities. The male could attack if Elias touched the snare. He could interpret movement, threat, or worse. If the lioness cried out in pain, it might trigger something primal, something uncontrollable. Yet the lion had brought him here. That fact refused to loosen its grip on Elias's thoughts. Lions did not seek humans. They avoided them, feared them, or attacked them. They did not guide them. They did not wait. A powerful premonition settled over Elias, heavy and inescapable. If he walked away now, he would carry it for the rest of his life. The look in those eyes would follow him into sleep, into old age, into whatever peace he hoped to earn someday. Slowly, Elias reached behind him and unclipped his radio from his belt. The male lion stiffened immediately, muscles coiling. "Easy," Elias whispered. He set the radio down on the dirt away from both of them. No sudden moves. The lion watched, alert. But still, Elias exhaled shakily. He removed his knife next to the small utility blade he used for rope and brush. The male lioness head lowered a fraction, eyes narrowing. "I need this," Elias said softly. "I need to help her." The lioness' chest rose and fell, seconds stretched taut as wire. Then, almost imperceptibly, the male stepped aside, just enough to open a narrow path toward the lioness. Elias's breath caught. That single movement tore through the last of his doubt. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a misinterpreted instinct. This lion was making a choice. Elias moved closer, heart pounding so violently he feared the lion could hear it. Every step felt like crossing an invisible boundary. He knelt beside the lioness, careful to keep his body angled away from the male. Up close, the damage was worse. The snare had cut deep into muscle. Infection had swollen the flesh, turning it dark and angry. The lioness shuddered when Elias touched the wire, her breath hitching painfully. The male lion rumbled again, louder, now stepping forward. "I know," Elias said quickly. "I know. Lions, be careful." His hands shook as he examined the snare. Cutting it wrong could tighten the wire. Cutting it too fast could cause catastrophic bleeding. He needed tools. He didn't have medication. He didn't carry backup. He couldn't call without leaving. "This is insane," his mind screamed. "You're not a veterinarian. You're not equipped for this. You're trusting your life to an animal that should tear you apart." And yet beneath the feared, something steadier held him in place, a certainty. If the lion attacked, Elias would accept it, not because he was brave, but because the alternative, walking away, felt worse than death. He glanced at the male lion once more. Their eyes met. In that gaze, Elias saw no mercy, no softness, but he saw resolve, the same resolve Elias had seen in rangers who stayed with injured colleagues under fire, the same resolve he had felt when he chose this life over safety. This lion was not asking for kindness, he was demanding loyalty. Elias tightened his grip on the knife and leaned closer to the snare, his heart heavy with dread and purpose intertwined. Whatever happened next, the savanna would remember it, and so would he. The lioness drifted in and out of consciousness, suspended in a narrow corridor between pain and darkness. Each breath was an effort, shallow and uneven, as though the air itself had grown heavy and reluctant to enter her lungs. The world around her came in fragments, heat pressing against her skin, the sour sting of infection, the distant hum of insects that never rested beneath it. All was the constant, merciless pressure of the wire biting deeper every time her body betrayed her with a tremor. She did not know how long she had been there. Time had dissolved into suffering. Once, days ago, maybe longer, she had been strong. She had moved through the grass with confidence, muscles coiled and ready, the savanna bending to her presence. She had hunted, fed, rested beside the others beneath open skies. Then came the pain, sudden, shocking, a violent pull at her leg that sent her crashing to the ground. Panic had surged through her, instinct screaming to fight, to escape, to tear free. The more she struggled, the worse it became. The wire had tightened like a living thing, cruel and precise, slicing through flesh, stealing strength with every movement. Eventually, even instinct surrendered to exhaustion. She lay still, not because she accepted death, but because her body had no more to give. Now, lying beneath the shade of twisted roots, she felt something new. Hands, not paws, not teeth, hands that trembled, warm and uncertain, touching the metal that had become part of her. Pain flared white-hot through her leg, and a sound escaped her throat before she could stop it. The world sharpened briefly, and she forced one eye open. The shape above her was wrong. Upright, pale, smelling of unfamiliar fear and something else resolved. A human. Her body tried to respond, muscles tensing for a strike that would never come. The effort drained what little strength remained, leaving her breath hitching in shallow gasps. She could sense him there, closer than any human had ever dared to be. She felt the vibration of his presence through the ground, the rhythm of his heart beating too fast, too loud, and behind him, Always behind him was the male. She did not need to see him to know he was there. She felt him as surely as she felt the sun on her back. His scent was familiar, grounding, a reminder that she was not alone. That knowledge, more than anything, kept her anchored to the world. If he had left, she might have let go already, but he stayed. He had stayed since the beginning. She remembered his arrival through the fog of pain, how he had circled her carefully, at first cautious, alert, how he had tested the air, listening to sounds she could no longer track. She remembered the low rumble in his chest, not anger, but frustration. He had tried to pull at the wire once it stopped. When she cried out, the sound ripping through him as surely as it tore through her. After that he had waited, guarded. When the human appeared, moving, wrong, smelling wrong, she had felt the male tense, ready to defend what little remained of her. She had not known what he would do. Attack, flee, choose survival the way nature demanded. Instead, he had done something else. Now, as the human knelt beside her, she watched through half-lidded eyes, senses dulled, but still alive. She felt the cold touch of metal shift slightly, the pressure changing in a way that made her whimper despite herself. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it flickered something unfamiliar. Hope. The human as hands paused every time she reacted, as though he were listening to her without understanding her language. His movements were slow, deliberate, careful in a way she did not expect. She had known pain from teeth and claws, from hunger and competition. This was different. This was pain with intention behind it. Her breathing grew erratic. Infection burned through her veins, making the world swim. Her vision blurred, darkening at the edges. She was losing the fight, her body slipping away, piece by piece. The human leaned closer, his voice low, steady, though she could hear the strain beneath it. She did not understand the sounds, but the tone carried something that reached her through the haze. Not threat, not dominance, concern. Her head sagged back against the dirt. The effort of staying conscious became too much. She drifted again, sinking into a place where the pain dulled and the world faded to shadows. Somewhere far away, she felt the vibration of the male-ass rumble, deeper, now more urgent. It pulled at her, a tether she refused to let break. She woke again to a sharp tearing sensation, followed by a sudden release. The pressure changed. The wire shifted, loosening in a way it had not before. Pain flared brighter than anything she had known, and she cried out, a raw sound ripped from her chest. Her body convulsed, instinct screaming at her to flee, to fight, to survive. The male responded instantly. A thunderous snarl shattered the air, vibrating through the ground, through her bones. She felt him move, felt the rush of his body, the threat in his presence. The human froze for a terrifying heartbeat. Everything hung in balance. Then the pain eased just slightly, enough for her to realize something had changed. The wire was no longer biting deeper, it was loosening. The human had stopped moving. She forced herself to focus, drawing in shallow breaths. The male-ass rumble softened, shifting from warning to vigilance. He stayed closer than before, his shadow falling over her, a barrier between her and the rest of the world. The human resumed his work even slower. Now she felt the blade slice through metal, heard the faint snap as attention released. The wire fell away from her legs, slack and useless. For a moment, there was nothing but pain, raw, exposed, overwhelming. Then came the strange sensation of absence. The thing that had been killing her was gone. Her body sagged, muscles trembling uncontrollably. Blood flowed freely now, no longer constricted by the wire. The world tilted, spun. She was dying. She knew it with a clarity that cut through the fog. Freedom had come too late. The human pressed something against her. Wound pressure, firm but gentle. His hands were shaking again. He made sounds, urgent, strained, as though trying to hold the world together with words alone. She felt the male lie down beside her, his body warm against her flank. He pressed close, sharing his heat, his presence steady and unyielding. It was the first time since the snare that she felt something like safety. Her breathing slowed, the world narrowed to sensation. The warmth of the male, the pressure of the humanist hands, the fading ache in her leg. Darkness crept closer, soft and tempting. She hovered there, balanced between letting go and holding on. Somewhere deep inside, something stubborn stirred. Not instinct, not fear, will. She drew one more breath, then another. The pain did not disappear, but it became manageable, distant. The human stayed, the male stayed. Against all expectations, she was not alone at the edge of death, and for the first time since the wire closed around her leg, the lioness chose to fight her way back. The rules had been clear long before this moment ever existed. Do not approach an injured predator without backup. Do not enter a confined space with an unrestrained lion. Do not improvise when human life is not immediately at risk. Do not, under any circumstance, place yourself between a bonded pair. Every protocol the ranger had learned, every manual, every briefing, every hard-earned lesson, whispered by older men around campfires, was built on a single truth. Hesitation could get you killed, but recklessness would get you killed faster. And yet, standing there beneath the tangled canopy, he realized something terrifying. There was no protocol for what was happening now. The lioness lay motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. The wire was gone, but the damage it had done remained. Raw flesh, swelling, the unmistakable smell of infection. She was alive, but only barely. Her body balanced on the thinnest edge between recovery and collapse. Any textbook would have labeled her unsalvageable. In the field, the male stood over her like a living wall. He had not moved since the wire fell away. Not forward, not back. His massive frame remained fixed, muscles taut, but controlled. His attention split between the lioness at his side and the human, kneeling dangerously close. Every instinct in the ranger screamed that this was the moment the lion would act. When the threat lingered too long, when tolerance expired, but the attack never came. Instead, the male's tail flicked, once slow and deliberate. His breathing matched the lioness's, as if anchoring her to the world through rhythm alone. His eyes never left the ranger, not with fury, but with something heavier, expectation. The ranger swallowed hard. His radio crackled softly at his shoulder, the distant voices of colleagues urging caution, urging retreat, urging him to wait for sedation teams that were hours away. He did not answer because waiting meant watching her die. He knew it with the same certainty he had known rain was coming by the smell of the wind, or that a herd would move before the ground trembled. Infection was already spreading. Shock hovered close without intervention, cleaning antibiotics, pressure. She would not survive the night, and intervention meant staying. Staying meant violating everything he had been taught. His hands trembled as he reached for the kit strapped to his belt. Gauze, antiseptic, supplies meant for humans, never for a lioness weighing nearly twice his own body. He moved slowly, deliberately, telegraphing every intention with exaggerated calm. He did not look at the male, not directly. Predator's red eyes to well. He focused instead on the lioness, on the rise of her ribs, on the small signs that she was still fighting. When he touched her leg again, she flinched weakly, a low sound vibrating. In her throat the male stiffened, instantly a warning growl rippling through his chest like distant thunder. The ranger froze, seconds stretched into something unbearable. Sweat trickled down his spine despite the cool shade. He lowered his hands, palms open, body angled away in submission, the way one acknowledged dominance without challenge. "I am helping," he whispered, knowing words meant nothing, but tone meant everything. The male did not advance. Slowly, so slowly it felt like defying gravity itself. The ranger resumed. He cleaned the wound as best he could, each motion careful, respectful, guided by intuition more than training. Blood stained his gloves. The lioness shuddered, but she did not strike. She did not pull away. She endured. The risk was no longer theoretical. He was fully committed. Nah, if the male decided this had gone too far, there would be no escape, no chance to run. He would die where he knelt, another quiet casualty. The forest would reclaim without ceremony, and still he stayed. As the minutes passed, something subtle shifted. The male lowered himself to the ground, not relaxing, but settling into a position of watchful guardianship. His presence loomed close enough that the ranger could feel the vibration of his breathing through the earth. It was a trust no human should ever be given. When the ranger finally leaned back, Supply's exhausted hands shaking from strain and adrenaline, he exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The lioness's breathing had steadied, the bleeding had slowed. She was not safe, but she was no longer slipping away. Now came the hardest part, leaving. Every instinct told him to withdraw immediately, to put distance between himself and the pride before tolerance evaporated. He gathered his things slowly, never turning his back, movements measured, deliberate. He rose to his feet inch by inch, every muscle braced for impact. The male watched, one step back, then another, still nothing. At the edge of the clearing, the ranger stopped. Against every rational impulse, he looked directly at the lion, not with dominance, not with fear, but with acknowledgement. The male's gaze held his for a long, impossible moment. They regarded each other, two guardians bound by a shared line neither had planned to cross. Then the lion turned his head, nudging the lioness gently with his massive muzzle, a gesture so intimate it nearly broke the ruse's resolve. That was his dismissal. The ranger backed away fully, then retreating into the trees, heart pounding so violently it drowned out every sound of the forest. Only when the foliage swallowed him whole did his legs give out, forcing him to brace against a trunk, breath coming in ragged gasps. He had done it. He had broken every rule and survived. Behind him, unseen but deeply felt, the male remained beside the lioness, guarding her through the long, dangerous hours ahead. Whether she would live or die was still uncertain, but for now, because of a risk no protocol allowed, she had a chance. And sometimes the ranger realized survival depended not on rules, but on knowing exactly when to risk everything to defy them. The story did not spread the way people expected it to. There were no dramatic headlines at first, no shaky footage captured on a phone, no viral clip that flattened the moment into spectacle. It moved quietly, carried in low voices between rangers, veterinarians, and field teams who understood how impossible it truly was. A sentence here, a pause there, a look exchanged that said more than words ever could. A lion allowed a human to touch his mate, not sedated, not restrained, not separated by steel or glass. Allowed. At first, many refused to believe it. They searched for simpler explanations, misinterpretation, coincidence, desperation. Lions, after all, do not negotiate. They do not weigh moral choices. They act on instinct, hierarchy, survival. And yet the facts resisted dismissal. The ranger survived. The lioness lived through the night. The male never attacked. As the days passed and the lioness began to recover, the truth became harder to ignore. The pride did not abandon her. The male did not grow erratic or aggressive afterward. If anything, he became more vigilant, positioning himself closer whenever vehicles passed the area, watching with a calm intensity that discouraged intrusion without inviting conflict. Those who witnessed him understood something had shifted, not in nature, but in perception. The ranger was asked again and again what he thought the lion understood in that moment. Did he recognize help? Did he understand intention? Did he grasp that the human kneeling beside his mate was trying to save her, not harm her? The ranger never offered grand theories. He did not speak of intelligence or empathy in ways that softened the lion into something human. Instead, he spoke carefully, choosing words like a man handling something fragile. He knew she mattered, he said once, and he knew I wasn't there for myself. That answer unsettled people more than any scientific explanation could have, because it implied something uncomfortable, that recognition does not belong exclusively to humans, and that compassion may not require language or shared biology, only shared vulnerability. The story reached beyond conservation circles, eventually not through sensationalism, but through the slow gravity of truth. When it did, reactions fractured along familiar lines. Some called it proof of something sacred in nature. Others dismissed it as anthropomorphism. Many simply felt something they could not name. But among those who were closest to the wild, the lesson was clear. Power does not always express itself through violence. The male lion was not weak that day. He did not hesitate because he was confused or afraid. He exercised restraint, and restraint among apex predators is the most deliberate form of power there is. He chose not to act on dominance alone. He chose watchfulness over destruction. He chose to wait. That choice forced humans to confront their own assumptions. For generations, people had defined predators by what they take: teeth, claws, kill counts, territory claimed through blood. Yet here was an animal capable of holding all that power in check, not because he was forced to, but because something else mattered more. In that moment, his mate, the bond, the possibility that help could come from an unexpected source. The ranger carried the lesson with him long after the incident faded from official reports. It changed how he moved through the forest, how he approached conflict, how he interpreted fear. He understood now that danger was not the opposite of trust, and that trust, when earned, did not erase risk but transformed it. Others learned differently. Veterinarians began to speak more openly about presence and intention during field interventions. Younger rangers listened more closely to elders who spoke of reading behavior rather than dominating situations. Even policy discussions shifted subtly, acknowledging that rigid rules could not anticipate every reality the wild would present. But perhaps the most profound lesson reached people far removed from savannas and forests, people who would never face a lion. They heard the story and recognized themselves in it, not as the ranger, brave and steady, but as the lion, protective, cornered, afraid of losing something precious, trapped between instinct and choice. And in that recognition came a question that lingered long after the story ended. If a creature shaped entirely by survival could pause, evaluate, and choose restraint, what excuse did humans have when they did not? The lion taught nothing through words. He delivered no message. He offered no moral lesson. Intentionally, he simply acted according to something deeper than impulse, a truth that did not need explanation to be felt. Sometimes strength is knowing when not to strike. Sometimes leadership is standing still. Sometimes trust is extended not because it is safe but because it is necessary. The forest returned to its rhythm soon after. Tracks faded, wounds healed. Life moved forward as it always does, but those who heard the story never quite returned to the world as it was before, because once you accept that compassion can exist where you least expect it, you are forced to ask harder things of yourself. And that is what the lion taught everyone who heard his story, not how to be fearless, not how to dominate, but how to recognize the rare moment when choosing restraint can change everything. Here is a powerful cinematic 600-word conclusion written in English, crafted to resonate with a U.S. audience 25 to 60 and align with your emotional storytelling style. It emphasizes lessons, meaning, and ends with a clear call to subscribe for continued support. In the end, this story was never just about a lion, a ranger, or a moment that defied logic. It was about a choice in a world governed by instinct, power, and survival. One animal made a decision that rewrote everything humans thought they understood about the wild. The lion did not roar. He did not attack. He did not retreat. Instead, he stood still, guarding life, allowing help, trusting something outside his own species when every rule of nature suggested he should not. And that choice echoes far beyond the savanna. What this story teaches us is not that animals are like humans, but that compassion itself is older than us, deeper than language, more fundamental than culture. It reminds us that empathy does not belong to one species alone, it belongs to life itself. The ranger learned this lesson face to face with death. He stepped forward not because he was fearless, but because he understood that doing nothing would mean losing everything. Courage, as this story shows, is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it, guided by purpose rather than panic. The lion, in turn, showed a different kind of strength, not dominance, not violence, but restraint. The rarest form of power is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to protect. In choosing to trust, the lion protected not only his mate, but also something fragile and sacred, the possibility that cooperation can exist even in the most dangerous moments. For us, the readers and viewers, the lesson is even more personal. How often do we react out of instinct, anger, fear, self-preservation, without pausing to consider another path? How often do we assume the worst, draw our boundaries too tightly, or refuse help because it comes from an unexpected place? This story asks us to slow down, to listen, to recognize that sometimes the most meaningful transformations happen not through force but through understanding. It challenges us to redefine strength, to see courage not only in dramatic action but in patience, to recognize leadership not in control but in responsibility, and to remember that trust once extended has the power to change outcomes we believe were inevitable. The forest eventually returned to silence. The lioness healed. The ranger walked away. Life continued, but the truth remained. Some moments leave marks that never fade, not on the land, but on the heart. They remind us who we are capable of being when we choose compassion over fear and conscience over convenience. That is why stories like this matter. They don't just entertain us, they remind us of our shared responsibility to protect the vulnerable, to respect life in all its forms, and to believe that kindness can still exist where we least expect it. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see the world a little differently, please subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. Your support gives us the motivation to continue sharing powerful stories that celebrate courage, compassion, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. More unforgettable stories are coming, and we'd be honored to have you with us on this journey.